Imagine being born into Victorian England with almost nothing. No savings, no welfare state, no safety net, and one illness, one injury, or one lost job could destroy your entire family. For millions of working-class people, poverty wasn't simply about having less money. It could mean hunger, overcrowded housing, dangerous work, disease, and the constant fear of ending up in the workhouse. During the Victorian era, Britain was becoming the world's leading industrial power. Factories expanded, cities grew, railways transformed the country. But beneath that extraordinary progress was another England, an England of overcrowded streets, polluted industrial towns, and families struggling to survive. In rapidly growing cities, housing could be appalling. Entire families might live in a single room, sanitation was often poor, clean water was not guaranteed, and infectious diseases such as cholera, typhus, and tuberculosis could spread rapidly in overcrowded communities. For children, poverty could begin almost as soon as they were old enough to work. Children from poor families worked in factories, mills, mines, and workshops. Some worked extremely long hours in dangerous conditions. The Industrial Revolution created enormous wealth, but that wealth was not shared equally. And when a worker became sick or injured, there was no modern welfare system to catch them. For people who could no longer support themselves, the workhouse could become the final destination. The 1834 Poor Law introduced a national system designed partly to discourage people from seeking poor relief unless they entered the workhouse. Life inside could be deliberately harsh. Families could be separated, inmates wore uniforms, food was controlled, work was compulsory. The system was intended to make receiving relief less attractive than finding employment. But behind the statistics were real human beings. Mothers, fathers, children, people who had lost their jobs, people who were sick, people who had been abandoned, and people who simply could not survive on the wages available to them. Yet Victorian England wasn't only a story of suffering. Reformers, journalists, doctors, and campaigners increasingly exposed the conditions faced by the poor. Parliament introduced new laws. Public health reforms gradually improved sanitation. Factory legislation increasingly restricted dangerous and exploitative working conditions. And slowly, Britain began to understand that poverty was not simply a personal failure. It could be a consequence of the society people were born into. That's what makes Victorian poverty so important to remember, because the Victorian age is often presented through magnificent buildings, wealthy industrialists, royal ceremonies, and technological progress. But there was another Victorian England, an England where survival could depend on your birthplace, your health, your job, and pure luck. Behind the grand streets and magnificent architecture were millions of ordinary people trying to survive, and some of their stories have almost disappeared. So when you look at Victorian England, don't only look at the palaces, look down the streets, look inside the factories, look into the overcrowded rooms. Because the true story of Victorian Britain wasn't just about how the rich became richer, it was also about how ordinary people fought to survive. And that is the brutal reality of Victorian poverty. Subscribe to Echoes of England for more forgotten stories from Britain's past. Because history isn't only about kings and queens, it's about the people who had to live through it.